The laughter hit like glass shattering. "Tell you what," the CEO's voice boomed, sharp as the clink of his champagne glass against the prototype's hood. He smirked at the silent crowd of investors, journalists, and influencers. "If that girl can fix this disaster, I'll even let her marry my son." Phones shot up instantly. Flashes lit the chrome body of the silent engine in the center of the showroom. The air vibrated with mockery and champagne fizz. The girl everyone turned to look at wasn't dressed for the gala. No diamond necklace, no velvet gown, just a faded blue mechanic's jumpsuit and grease stains that no wash could fully hide. She stood in the corner, clutching a rag, trying to stay invisible. Now all eyes pierced her. The CEO spread his arms like a showman on stage, relishing the spotlight. His Rolex glittered as he waved toward her. "Go on, sweetheart. Show the world what back alley repairs look like." The crowd erupted in laughter, the sound bouncing against the glass walls of the luxury showroom. A few guests whispered under their breath, not with kindness, but curiosity. "Who is she?" "Maintenance staff, I think. Someone's maid's daughter." Perfect for tonight's entertainment. Her knuckles tightened on the rag. She lowered her gaze, taking a breath as though the floor beneath her feet could swallow her whole. The engine sat like a dead beast on its pedestal, sleek curves. Bold design, but silent, stubborn, refusing to start. For weeks, the CEO's team had boasted about this revolutionary machine. Tonight was supposed to be its grand debut. Instead, it had failed in front of the very people he needed to impress, and so he had turned his humiliation into her humiliation. The CEO's son, standing a few steps behind, shifted uneasily. His polished shoes reflected the spotlights, his jaw tight with embarrassment. He didn't laugh with the others. His eyes flicked toward the girl, then back to the floor. "Don't be shy," the CEO prodded, voice dripping sarcasm. He tapped the hood of the prototype as though it were a drum. "Maybe you've got magic hands? Or maybe you're just afraid." The laughter grew crueler. Someone whistled. Someone else snapped a photo. She wanted to walk away. Every instinct told her to lower her head, slip back into the shadows, and let the humiliation pass. But the camera lights pinned her in place, and the CEO's voice kept digging, louder, sharper. "Or are you too scared, little girl?" His eyes narrowed, daring her. The way he spat girl turned the word into a weapon. The crowd leaned in, hungry for her response. Phones hovered like vultures waiting for the kill. Her chest rose slowly. She kept her silence, her fingers trembling slightly as she wrung the rag. The humiliation stung, but beneath it was something heavier, something steadier. She lifted her chin just enough for her eyes to meet his. The laughter faltered. Just a fraction. For the first time that night, the CEO's grin stiffened. The lights gleamed brighter on the chrome engine, reflecting the impossible choice before her. Shrink back and carry the shame, or step forward into a trap designed to break her. The room held its breath, and still, she said nothing. The cliffhanger lingered in the air like static electricity. The crowd's whispers turned into chants. "Come on! Show us! Fix it if you can!" The CEO raised his glass again, triumphant in mockery. "Well, or are you going to keep hiding?" The whispers wouldn't stop. "She's stalling. Maybe she doesn't even know where to start." Cute story for the cameras, though. The CEO let the crowd's jeers swell before he spoke again. He was a conductor now, guiding their mockery like an orchestra. "Go on, sweetheart." He gestured lazily, his diamond cufflinks catching the spotlight. "We don't bite. Unless you're afraid. My engineers couldn't fix this, but maybe the maid's daughter can." Laughter rolled through the showroom. Someone tapped the screen of their phone, live streaming to an audience far larger than the people in the room. Already she could see the comments flashing, emojis, insults, jokes. The humiliation wasn't just here, it was spreading. She stepped back instinctively, lowering her rag. "Sir," she said quietly, "I'm not here for this. I was only hired to clean up, nothing more." The CEO seized on her words. "Not here for this!" he repeated, mocking her tone. "Then why are you here, girl? Standing in the presence of greatness? You should be thanking me for giving you a chance to stand next to a real machine." The crowd laughed harder. Her throat tightened. She kept her eyes down, focusing on the grease stains on her hands. She had no interest in being their entertainment. Every fiber of her being wanted to slip away quietly to avoid the cameras, the ridicule, the spotlight that burned too hot. But his voice cut through again, crueler this time. "If you're scared, just say so." The words were heavy, meant to crush. We all know what happens when amateurs play with professionals. They get burned. Someone in the crowd jeered, "Come on, fix it if you're so smart." Another added, "Or at least pretend. Give us a show." The CEO smirked, raising his glass. Maybe she's worried about breaking a nail? The room roared with laughter. Champagne glasses clinked, heels tapped on the marble floor. The noise pressed in on her, mocking from all sides. Her hands stopped trembling. She folded the rag carefully, too carefully, like a soldier folding a flag. Her breathing steadied. When she finally spoke, her words cut through the room like the quiet before a storm. "If I touch it," she said, her voice low but unshakable, "I won't fail." The laughter died instantly. Her words were too precise, too calm. The sound of them sliced through the jeers and landed heavy on every chest in the room. Even the CEO froze for a moment, caught off guard. Then he barked a laugh louder than before, trying to drown the silence she had created. "Oh, that's Rich! Did you hear her? She says she won't fail." He leaned toward his son, smirking, but his son didn't return the grin. His son's eyes stayed on her, watching, curious. The crowd wasn't laughing quite as freely anymore. A few guests leaned in, whispering. Some adjusted their glasses. The bravado of the room faltered just slightly. The CEO recovered quickly, striding toward a workbench and sweeping a hand across it. Tools clattered like dice in a gambler's hand. He picked one up, a wrench, and held it out to her like a dare. "Well then, little mechanic," he sneered. "Show us." She didn't move. Not yet. The cameras zoomed closer. The moment stretched like a wire pulled tight, ready to snap. The CEO tilted his head, feigning impatience. "Unless, of course, you're all talk." Her eyes rose at last, steady and unflinching. She stepped forward, each movement deliberate, each step echoing louder than it should on the marble floor. She reached out, took the wrench from his hand, and held it with quiet certainty. The crowd leaned forward as one. Every phone raised higher. The CEO gave her a mocking bow, sweeping his arm toward the dead engine. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's entertainment, a mechanic's fairy tale." Her grip tightened around the wrench. She said nothing. But in her silence, there was no fear, only calm, only certainty, and the crowd could feel it. The wrench felt heavy in her hand, but not unfamiliar. She walked to the stalled prototype, the crowd parting slightly, whispering like waves in a restless tide. Spotlights hit her face. Sweat glistened along her hairline, but her eyes were calm. She crouched by the engine, not touching it yet, only listening. The CEO rolled his eyes dramatically. "Look at that, she's praying to it." The crowd chuckled, but softer now, more uncertain. She pressed her palm lightly against the hood, closing her eyes. The silence around the dead machine wasn't empty to her. It was speaking. The faint resistance in the gears, the smell of fuel lines, the misplaced hum that should have been there but wasn't. The cameras zoomed in on her grease-stained fingers as she gently tapped a bolt, clink, clink, measuring rhythm with her ears. A flashbulb went off, and the world shifted. Flashback, a tiny garage. The smell of oil, rust, and hope. She was 7, crouched beside her father, who knelt by an old sedan with its guts spilled open. His hands were steady, even when rent was overdue, even when dinner was nothing more than bread and tea. "Engines are like people," he told her, his deep voice soft in the dim light. "They breathe, they fight, they get tired. But if you listen carefully, they'll always tell you what's wrong." Her small hands held the flashlight as he tightened a screw with precision. She mimicked his movements, copying the way he handled tools like instruments in an orchestra. When she was 10, he let her rebuild her first carburetor. Her fingers bled, her clothes were ruined. But when the engine coughed alive, she laughed harder than she ever had. By 14, she was fixing neighbors' motorcycles for free, slipping the money under her sister's school books when no one was looking. At 17, she was sneaking into online forums, arguing with engineers twice her age under a fake name. Her diagrams silenced men who dismissed her as a troll. None of them ever knew the genius behind those posts was a girl working in a cramped garage, under a flickering bulb, with secondhand tools. And when her father passed, leaving nothing but that garage and his grease-stained manuals, she worked nights alone, hands black with oil, tears hidden under the roar of engines. She kept listening, always listening, returned to present, their eyes opened. The crowd was still laughing, but softer now, confused by her stillness. She picked up a screwdriver from the table, slid it into a housing panel, and she pulled the panel free and tilted it toward the light. A faint scorch mark lined the valve. "This engine isn't broken," she said calmly, her voice carrying like a bell. "It was designed wrong." Gasps rippled through the room. The crowd looked at one another, eyebrows raised. Someone muttered, "What did she just say?" The CEO let out a booming laugh, trying to retake control. "Oh, brilliant. Now the cleaning staff is a design consultant." "Did you hear that?" He turned to the investors, grinning. "Maybe she'll teach MIT a thing or two," but his laughter rang hollow. The son's brow furrowed. His eyes lingered on her hands, watching the efficiency of each movement. She wasn't fumbling. She wasn't guessing. She was diagnosing. She set the panel down, pointed to the scorched valve. "Fuel intake misaligned. Pressure's bleeding where it shouldn't. That's why it stalls under ignition." The room went utterly still. Even the clicking of cameras slowed. The CEO waved her off, trying to summon laughter again. "Luck. A lucky guess. My engineers spent months on this." But his voice cracked on the last word, because even the crowd could feel it now. This wasn't a guess. This was mastery. The wrench clicked into place with a sharp metallic sound. The crowd, pressed against velvet ropes, leaned forward as though at a prize fight. Phones hovered higher. The CEO folded his arms, smirk sharp, his gold watch catching every flash of light. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now watching YouTube's next comedy clip," he declared. Mechanic Barbie versus a billion-dollar machine. The laughter that followed wasn't as loud as before. It was thinner, uneasy. She didn't answer him. She crouched low, hair falling against her cheek, and slid the wrench into the intake manifold. Each movement was deliberate, precise. There was no showmanship, no hesitation, only calm control. The CEO's son shifted again, his voice low, almost to himself. "She's not fumbling." She twisted a valve gently, listening. Then, with a quick tug, she removed it completely, holding it up to the light. Burn marks laced the metal like veins. She placed it on the table behind her without a word. "She's guessing," the CEO boomed, forcing laughter. "Pull enough pieces out, eventually something will fit. Isn't that right?" He looked to the crowd for backup, but more and more of them were silent now, eyes narrowed, curious. Her hands moved faster, not rushed, but certain. A cable unlatched, a filter pulled free, a housing shifted just slightly with a soft knock. The sound reverberated through the room, faint but purposeful, like notes in a melody only she could hear. The showroom filled with a strange tension. Every snap of a bolt, every squeak of a ratchet carried like gunfire. She wiped her hands on her jumpsuit, leaned closer, and adjusted a small component with 2 turns of her wrist. Then she paused, listening again. The CEO muttered, half to himself now, "She's bluffing." His voice lacked conviction. Whispers in the crowd grew louder. "She knows engines. That wasn't random. She isolated the intake pressure. Did you see how fast she found it?" One investor lowered his glasses, murmuring, "That's not a bluff. That's precision." Her fingers traced a wire along the edge of the housing, then clipped it back into place with a decisive snap. She exhaled slowly, as if sealing the final move of a long-awaited strategy. The son's eyes widened. He took a step forward, voice breaking through the hush. "Dad, she isn't fixing it." The CEO scowled. "What are you babbling about?" "She's redesigning it." That single word, redesigning, spread like wildfire through the room. The murmurs turned to astonished silence. The CEO tried to laugh, but it came out dry, brittle. The girl mechanic wiped her palms again, then stepped back. Tools clattered softly as she set them down. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Try it now. The crowd froze. Not a whisper, not a breath. Cameras locked in. The son looked at his father. The CEO hesitated, caught between his ego and the trap he himself had set. "Go on," she said calmly, eyes steady. "If you're not afraid." The words landed like a mirror turned back on him. The same taunt he had thrown at her now burned in his ears. The CEO's jaw clenched. He nodded at his son sharply, as if commanding him to turn the ignition instead. The son slid into the driver's seat, his hand trembling as it touched the key. The crowd leaned so far forward it seemed the velvet ropes might snap. The girl stood with her arms folded, grease streaking her forearms, face calm as stone. The silence stretched, seconds dragging like hours. Then, click. The ignition turned. Click. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life like a sleeping beast awakened. The sound wasn't just mechanical, it was primal. A growl that shook the glass walls of the showroom. The polished floor vibrated beneath the crowd's feet. Gasps broke the silence. Dozens of phones jerked upward, capturing every frame. The blue indicator lights flared across the dashboard, glowing bright and steady, proof that this machine wasn't limping. It was alive, reborn. The CEO's son froze at the wheel, eyes wide, lips parted in disbelief. "It's perfect," he whispered, almost drowned out by the rising chorus of awe around him. The crowd erupted. Applause crashed like waves. Shouts pierced the air. "She did it!" "No way!" "Unbelievable!" A woman in a sequined dress clutched her husband's arm, her voice trembling. "I've seen engineers try for weeks. And she just..." Cameras zoomed in on the girl. For the first time all night, she wasn't in the shadows. The lights gleamed off the streak of grease on her cheek, the steady fire in her eyes. She didn't smile, didn't raise her hands in triumph. She simply stood there, calm, while the world around her exploded in disbelief. The CEO staggered forward, his smirk gone, face drained of color. His hand trembled on his champagne glass until it slipped, crashing onto the marble floor. Crystal shards scattered at his feet. She tampered. His voice cracked, desperate. She had help, but the crowd wasn't listening. They surged closer, phones flashing, voices rising, drowning him out. The humiliation he had meant for her now wrapped itself around him like a noose. Everywhere he looked, he saw doubt. Investors whispering to one another, heads shaking. Journalists scribbling furiously. His son staring at him with something that looked like shame, and her. The girl who had been invisible a half hour ago now stood taller than anyone in the room. She didn't gloat. She didn't speak. She let the engine's roar speak for her. The sound filled the space like truth itself. The CEO stumbled, trying to gather himself. Listen, she doesn't belong here. She's just..." His words faltered. He couldn't say it. Not anymore. Not with every lens pointed at him, not with the evidence rumbling steady and strong behind her. The girl finally moved. She walked slowly toward the car, her boots echoing on marble, and leaned in just enough for the son to hear. Her voice was steady, cutting through the noise like a blade. "It wasn't broken," she said. "It was designed wrong." The son swallowed hard, staring at her. "You've improved it," she nodded once. Then, turning, she let her eyes lock with the CEO's. He flinched. For the first time in his career, the spotlight wasn't his. His own stage had betrayed him. His joke had flipped into a public execution, and there was no exit door. Every camera caught his stiff jaw, his twitching hands, the sweat breaking on his brow. The crowd's applause shifted into chants. Her name, the girl mechanic, whispered at first, then louder, until it became a chorus. Her! The CEO's empire had been built on commanding rooms like this. Tonight, he couldn't even command silence. His son stepped out of the car, his eyes no longer on his father, but on her. Something unreadable, admiration, respect, maybe even something deeper, flickered there. He opened his mouth, but the words stuck, lost in the roar around them. The girl stood firm. She didn't bow, didn't wave. She let the storm rage around her, unshaken, for in that moment, the entire balance of power had shifted. She was no longer the maid's daughter, no longer the subject of a cruel joke. She was the one who had done what his million-dollar engineers could not. The one who had silenced the room with nothing but a wrench and steady hands, and the CEO knew it. His humiliation wasn't just public, it was permanent. This night would live on every phone, every feed, every headline by morning. The girl turned away, wiping her hands on her jumpsuit one last time. Her eyes were calm, her shoulders straight. The crowd cheered, the engine purred, and the man who had mocked her could only stand there, broken in the ruins of his own arrogance. The engine still hummed behind her, smooth and steady like a heartbeat that refused to stop. But the showroom itself was chaos. Investors who had once clustered around the CEO like moths to flame now slipped from his side. Their tailored suits swished as they moved toward the girl, some with curiosity, some with open admiration. One of them, a silver-haired woman with sharp eyes, pulled off her glasses. "Do you realize what you just did?" she asked the girl, her voice trembling between awe and disbelief. "You didn't fix it. You re-engineered it." The girl said nothing. She only gave a small nod as though confirming a fact she had known all along. The investor's lips pressed tight. "Do you have any idea what this means? For the market? For his company?" She glanced at the CEO, who stood frozen, shoulders stiff, his jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. Or maybe I should say what it means against him. Reporters swarmed, microphones raised. "Miss, what's your name? Who trained you? Are you taking over the project?" Flashes blinded her eyes, but she didn't flinch. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, but she also wasn't afraid of it. The CEO tried to push forward, his voice straining. This is theft, sabotage." She tampered with, "Stop!" One of the investors snapped sharply, cutting him off. "We all saw it. She saved what you failed to deliver." That single word, failed, landed heavier than a hammer. The CEO staggered as though the ground had tilted beneath him. His empire, his pride, had just been stripped in front of the world, and there was no way to gather the pieces. The girl mechanic wiped her hands again, as if brushing away not grease this time, but the weight of everything collapsing around him. Her eyes never softened. The CEO's son stepped forward. He hesitated for a moment, caught between two worlds, the legacy of his father's name and the undeniable truth standing before him. Finally, he chose. "You don't need to answer them," he said softly, leaning closer to her so only she could hear. "Let the engine answer. It's already louder than anything they'll ever write." She glanced at him, studying his face, the nervous sincerity in his eyes. He wasn't mocking. He wasn't pitying. He meant every word. The CEO saw it, that quiet exchange, and his face contorted. For years he had demanded obedience from his son, molding him into a reflection of himself. Now, in one night, that mirror was shattered. "You—" His voice cracked, trembling with rage as he jabbed a finger at his son. "Don't you dare take her side against me!" But the son didn't flinch. He stepped closer to the girl instead. "I'm not taking sides," he said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. His voice trembled at first, then grew stronger. "I'm taking the truth." Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras turned instantly. The CEO staggered, choking on silence. His own blood had just condemned him in front of everyone. The girl didn't smile, but something shifted in her eyes. Not victory, not triumph, but a kind of justice. Quiet, steady, long overdue, one by one. The investors drifted farther from the CEO, as though stepping back from a crumbling building. Some left entirely. Others clustered near the girl, already whispering about contracts, about opportunities, about the future. The CEO was left alone in his own spotlight, drowning in it. For a man who had once lived on applause, the silence around him now was the loudest sound in the room. The girl turned away from him, walking toward the exit. The son hesitated, then followed. Reporters tried to block her path, shouting questions, but the crowd parted almost instinctively, as if recognizing that this wasn't her moment to explain. It was her moment to leave on her own terms. At the doorway, she paused. The hum of the engine still echoed faintly behind her, a reminder of what she had done. She looked back once, not at the crowd, Not at the cameras, but directly at the CEO. Her eyes said everything her lips didn't. You made me invisible. Tonight, I made myself unforgettable. Then she walked out. The son lingered for a heartbeat longer, his gaze torn between his father's collapsing figure and the girl disappearing into the night. Then, with a slow breath, he followed her into the unknown. Morning broke not with sunlight, but with headlines. By dawn, the video had gone viral. Clips from shaky cell phones, live streams, and even the official gala feed replayed across every platform. Millions watched the same 30-second moment. A young black mechanic stepping back from a prototype. Grease on her hands, voice calm as stone. "Try it now!" Then the engine roaring to life, drowning out the CEO's mocking laughter. It was everywhere. On TikTok, edits layered dramatic music over her final words. On Twitter, hashtags trended worldwide. After the girl who fixed it, Engine Queen, Respect Mechanics. On YouTube, reaction channels analyzed her every gesture like it was a chess match, pausing frame by frame to admire her precision. But the sharpest contrast was this. While she became a global symbol overnight, the CEO became a global punchline. Memes flooded in. Screenshots of his open-mouthed shock were pasted next to broken toys, rusted cars, captions reading, "CEO of failure." One clip, the moment he sneered, "Mechanic Barbie," replayed endlessly with laugh tracks layered over his voice. Networks ran the story as their lead. Young mechanic humiliates auto tycoon at his own gala. From invisible to unstoppable, the girl who outsmarted a billionaire. By 10 a.m., the CEO's company stock had slipped 6%. Investors demanded emergency meetings. Journalists camped outside his mansion gates. Every attempt he made to spin the story, claiming sabotage, theft, trickery, was crushed under the weight of the footage. People had seen it with their own eyes. Meanwhile, her world was unrecognizable. She woke in her small apartment to the buzzing of her cracked phone, nearly burning her eyes with the glow of endless notifications. Messages from strangers poured in, engineers, mechanics, activists, even celebrities. Some offered jobs, others offered scholarships. One famous tech investor tweeted publicly, "Whoever this girl is, I want her on my team yesterday." Her hands shook as she scrolled. It was overwhelming, and yet, amid the flood of attention, she stayed the same. She pulled on the same worn jumpsuit, tied her hair back the same way, and walked outside like she had 1,000 mornings before. Only this time, neighbors stopped her on the sidewalk. "That was you, wasn't it?" "The girl on the news! You showed him! You made us proud." Their words weren't mocking. They carried weight, warmth. For once, her silence wasn't mistaken for weakness. It was mistaken for strength. But not everyone celebrated. Across town, in his mansion, the CEO sat slumped in his office. His empire, built on intimidation and applause, was crumbling in real time. The same investors who once toasted him now refused his calls. The son he had tried to mold had defied him publicly, and the girl he mocked as invisible now had the world chanting her name. He stared at the morning news anchor's words. This could mark the end of an era for his company. For the first time in years, he had no response. At the same moment, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a stranger. It was a message request from an unverified account. But the name froze her breath. It was his son. The text was short. "They'll try to use you. Don't trust them. But if you want help, I'm here." She read it twice, her fingers hovering over the screen. Outside her window, a crowd was already gathering, calling her name, holding phones high, hoping for a glimpse. For the world, she was already a hero. But for herself, she knew this was only the beginning. By evening, the city felt different. Billboards that once advertised the CEO's company now flashed with her face. News anchors replaying her story, hashtags scrolling beneath. She hadn't asked for fame, but fame had found her. She stood outside her old garage, the one where she had first taught herself with broken engines and discarded parts. the hum of the gala's prototype still echoing in her chest. For years, she had been invisible here, just a mechanic's daughter, another pair of hands smeared with grease. Now the whole world wanted her hands. Her phone rang again. Investors, universities, journalists. Everyone wanted to own a piece of her victory. She ignored most of it. She wasn't a prize to be bought. The sun arrived quietly. No limousine, no press trail. Just a plain jacket and weary eyes. He stopped a few feet away, careful not to intrude. "I had to see you," he said softly. She studied him in silence, arms folded. The last time she'd seen him, he had stood beside his father, silent like a shadow. But last night, he'd stepped into the light, not for her, but for the truth. "That mattered. You don't owe me anything," she said at last. He shook his head. "No, but I owe myself something. To stand for what's right and—" He hesitated, swallowing the weight of his family's shame. "To apologize? My father humiliated you, and I stayed quiet too long." For a moment, she said nothing. The city buzzed around them, cars, sirens, laughter. Then finally she spoke. "You saw the truth," she said. "That's more than most did." "That's enough." Relief flickered across his face. Not forgiveness, not yet, but respect. Meanwhile, across town, the CEO's world had collapsed. His empire was bleeding money. Investors had pulled funding. News crews camped at his gates, capturing him yelling at assistants, slamming doors. His face, once the symbol of power, now decorated late-night comedy monologues. At a press conference, he tried to reclaim his voice. Cameras flashed as he stepped up to the podium. But before he could speak, questions drowned him. Why couldn't your billion-dollar team do what she did in minutes? Do you think mocking a young black mechanic is acceptable in today's world? Is this the end of your career? The microphones felt like daggers. For the first time in his career, he had no clever insult, no polished laugh, no answer. His empire had been built on arrogance, and arrogance had just destroyed it. The girl mechanic never saw the press conference. She didn't need to. His silence on every channel told her everything. Instead, she walked into her garage that night and found it filled with people, neighbors, other mechanics, even children peeking in with wide eyes. They weren't there for autographs or selfies. They were there because she had become proof that brilliance could come from anywhere, even from the grease-stained corners of a forgotten workshop. One little girl, no older than 10, clutched a broken toy car in her hands. She stepped forward shyly. "Can you fix it?" she whispered. The girl mechanic knelt down, took the toy gently, and smiled. The smallest smile, but real. "Of course," she said. And in that moment, it was clear. Her victory wasn't about engines or companies or humiliating a CEO. It was about dignity, about showing the world that greatness has nothing to do with wealth, titles, or family names, and everything to do with respect, patience, and truth. She wasn't invisible anymore, and she never would be again.